In this session, we are going to discuss personality, the TA perspective. TA is in short for transactional analysis. Transactional analysis, or TA in short, because it is popularly known as TA. So TA is a psychological tool that enables us to understand the structure of our personality or the different elements that constitute our personality. There are many theories of personality. There is a difference with transactional analysis, because transactional analysis, the structure of personality, when it discusses or describes, it is not about the constructs as you would see in other personality theory when you read psychology. This is by and large about experiences or the experienced observable realities that enable us to understand our own personality. So in this session, the aim is to become aware of your ego states and understand that behind every behavior of you, the kind of ego operations that happens, and also to understand the contamination of different ego states. This session may benefit PGC PDT students, PGDHE students, and B.Ed students. I would like to say that anyone who is in human service or interact with the human beings as part of the day-to-day professional life. So this is basically to understand your own personality and also to understand others' personality, how the ego states operate. Now let us see some slides to understand transactional analysis more and the personality perspective that TA proposes. Let's start with the slideshow, please. So we will begin with the slide. On the screen you have a description of what is TA. As I said earlier, TA stands for transactional analysis. TA is a theory of human behavior based on Dr. Eric Berne's discovery that every normal human being has three sets of behavior. Each set of behavior has its own kind of thinking, feeling, deciding, and acting. We will see the next slide. So that different sets of behavior, or the three sets of behavior he discovered, he put it into different category as parent ego state, adult ego state, and child ego state. Now when we are discussing in TA, parent, adult, child, they do not describe the biological parent, the biological adult, or the biological child. We are discussing the psychological state, that is the ego state. So therefore you should not confuse parent, adult, child ego states as that of the biological parent, adult, and child. Now let's see what is parent ego state. Parent ego states are replicas of the physiological and emotional attitudes and social behavior of parental behaviors. That means, as children, when we grow up, we observe a lot of things, the behavior of our parents or parent-like figures, which then become an emotional part of our life, that then get reflected in our social behavior, which are basically like the parental behavior which we observed. Now we are practicing it in our own life. So when we look back into our life, or as we live today, many of the behavior, you may sometimes think that I am behaving like my father, my mother, or any such parent figure like an uncle or auntie. Sometimes you would also hear people telling you, you are just like your father when you are doing certain things, or you are just like your mother, or you are behaving like your auntie or uncle. So these are basically like those experiences what you have observed while you were growing up, you have made part of your life, or your psychological the part of your psychological life. So now that gets reflected as your social behavior. Let's now go back to the slide and see what is adult ego state, or we will first see what is child ego state. Sorry, we will go back to the earlier one. Yes, the child ego state is, or the ego states are revivals of fixated ego states from earliest years. To understand that, let's look at what we have done as children. You can, the best way to understand that ego state, that part of your ego state, is to go back to your early childhood and recall the things you used to do, the way you used to react, and some of those behaviors you have retained even today. Maybe throwing tantrums, or a particular way of enjoying something. So as children, mostly you would see, when you observe children, that they love to do certain things. They are basically about fulfilling their own needs. They cry when they are hungry, which you don't do when you grow up as an adult. They are very happy doing certain things. They laugh quite a lot. They want to enjoy certain things. So even as adult, we tend to do certain things in that way. We like to do certain things. We love doing, playing a particular game, or having the company of someone, or sometimes we are so afraid of someone, that sense of fear. So even after you become an adult, you might become a biological parent, but even then, certain aspects of our life, what was very common during our childhood, we still would observe in our life as part of our social behavior, and we also see that in others. So that is basically the child ego states. Now we will go back to the slide and see the adult ego state. Adult is manifested by objective data processing and an alertness of the outside world of reality, including the psychological reality of other people. So we can understand it in this way. That is by and large about data processing. How do we do that? Because as we become adult, we gather quite a lot of experience in our life, doing things by ourselves and also observing others. So all that become part of our experience, and it becomes a data bank. So the adult part of our personality process that data, make decisions, will let us know the pros and cons. So by and large we can say it behaves like that part of our personality or our behavior. It behaves like a kind of a computer, meaning the data are already fed in. This doesn't mean that a child doesn't have adult. A child also has adult. So when a child makes a decision based on whatever the experience a child has, or how to get food, how to get its needs done, so all that part of the adult behavior in the child also we can see. But by and large, when you become an adult, biological adult, you gather quite a lot of experience in your life that become part of the data. So whenever you have to make a decision, so that data processing happens and you make the decision. So that is the adult ego state. So we were just discussing the three different ego states as discovered by Dr. Eric Berne that constitute our personality: the parent ego state, the adult ego state, and the child ego state. Now one by one we will try to understand the different ego states through certain examples. Let's see the next slide. This slide depicts the structural diagram as we see personality from the TA point of view. In transaction analysis, personality structure or the structure of the personality is depicted in this way. P stands for parent, A stands for adult, C stands for child. These are three circles. You would notice that they are of the same size. They are just touching each other. So that is to show that all the three ego states are part of our personality, and all the three ego states are equally important. So this is the way we depict personality, the ego state, in transactional analysis. In our next slides we will therefore use this particular diagram to explain or to understand the different aspect of personality. Let us just see the next slide. This is showing a behavioral model of ego states. You will understand why we call it a behavioral model, because by and large, if you just see on the screen there, I have just described it in the different kind of behavior we normally show in our day-to-day life. Earlier structural diagram you saw three circles, one on the top of the other. Now you would see that I have divided that into two parts. The upper one, that is the parent, and the adult, and at the bottom the child ego state into three parts. We will just start with the first circle, which is on the top. That is the parent ego state. In that you would see that nurturing parent as well as controlling parent. So the part of our parent ego state that has again different types of behavior. One kind of behavior is the nurturing behavior. The other kind of behavior is the controlling behavior, or the critical parent. the controlling parent, we also call it a critical parent. So there are basically two kinds of behavior you see. Then adult ego state, one is a photographic adult, the other one is combining adult. Two different types of ego states we see there within adult ego state. Sorry, two kinds of behavior we see within the adult ego state. The third one, that is a child ego state, we see three different sections. That is, we sometimes show behavior of a natural child, which can also be called as a free child. Sometimes we show rebellion, which is known as the rebellious child behavior. Then there is a third one, the adapted child behavior. There is also sometimes we call compliant child. So there are basically three behavior patterns we are able to see coming from the child ego state of any human being. Sometimes even four, that the complying child. Now one by one we will see what is nurturing parent and all the other behavioral part of the ego state. Let's see the next slide. The nurturing parent. Immediately as when I say nurturing parent, you get some idea. That is about the caring parent, the parent who shares your joy, your sorrow, the parent who consoles you, the parent who stands by you, the parent who let you do everything. So that is the nurturing parent. All of us look for that kind of behavior in others. And when we look back into our own life, if you start analyzing your own behavior, all of you have a nurturing parent in you. You don't have to be a biological parent to become to show nurturing parent behavior. Sometimes even on the road, suppose someone falls down. If you have that nurturing parent kind of behavior in you, you would immediately go to help the person. You may not know the person, it may be a stranger. And at home, of course, we show nurturing behavior to all our people at home, whether it is our parents or our children or siblings. So nurturing behavior is part of our life. Think of it, life without nurturing behavior. It would be pretty difficult. And another part of parent behavior is, or parent ego state is, the controlling behavior or the critical parent behavior. Let's see that. Are you familiar with the controlling parent behavior of you and others around you? Someone who is all the time criticizing you, someone who tells you a lot of do's and don'ts, someone who tries to control you. Are you one of those? Do you have quite a lot of controlling behavior in you, controlling others, criticizing others? To some extent, controlling behavior or the behavior as a critical parent is good, but if it is in a kind of overdose, then perhaps you may find it difficult. That you may not find it difficult, but others may find it difficult to interact with you. Have you noticed that? So check, do you have quite a lot of controlling behavior with you? Are you more of a critical parent than a nurturing parent in your behavior? It is part of our personality, but if a controlling parent behavior is dominating your parent ego state, then you may have difficulty in interacting with others, or others may find it difficult to interact with you. So quite a mixture of, or in the right proportion, if one can have nurturing parent as well as controlling parent behavior. So that constitute the best part of your parent ego state behavior. We will now go to the next slide. If you remember, earlier we saw the adult ego state, we divided it into two parts, or rather I said in the adult ego state you can observe two different kinds of behavior. One is the photographic adult behavior, that is just as the job done by a camera. The camera catches what is there. So the same way, whatever that data you received, when you just report it, that becomes part of your photographic adult behavior. Many a times you have to do that in your life. You should be able to report things as it is, as you see it, as you hear it, as you experience it. So that part of your behavior is known as a photographic adult behavior. Therein, the adult ego state is not trying to process the data. No analysis done, no synthesis done, no evaluation done. It would just present the data as it is. Reporting, basically. Therefore, we call it photographic adult. So that part of your behavior is known as a photographic adult. We will see the next slide. This is the second part of your adult ego state, that is combining adult. Therein it does quite a lot of processing, analysis, synthesis, evaluation, then give you the decision. So it functions like a computer. You feed data into the computer, then you have a software there to analyze it. So when you need it, the analysis, synthesis and evaluation done, you are presented with a kind of a decision. So in each human being, if you observe, you would see that so a part of their personality is constituted of these elements. They are able to make decisions based on the data they have already collected in their life. So that part is known as the combining adult. So there are basically two parts to the adult ego state: the photographic adult and the combining adult. The photographic adult does the reporting, the combining adult does the processing. The decision making comes from there. The reporting is necessary because that becomes part of the combining adult behavior. Data collected by the photographic adult and sometimes reported to the combining adult. The combining adult then makes the decision after processing it. We will now go to the third ego state, that is the child ego state. We will see the three different behavior. One is the natural child behavior we show. What does a child do? A child loves doing things that makes him or her happy. They are not aware of the danger they indulge in. So this part of our behavior is coming from the free child or the natural child, where pleasure-seeking behavior is at most. Whatever gives pleasure to me, I do that. That is the natural child behavior. It may be eating, it may be playing, it may be getting into any kind of activity that gives me quite a lot of pleasure. So that pleasure-seeking behavior in us, that is part of our natural child behavior or the free child behavior. Then we have the adapted child. Therein the child gets adapted to certain do's and don'ts which had come from the parents. While we are growing up, parents or parent-like figures give us quite a lot of instructions. There are certain do's and don'ts. We have to abide by certain rules. So all these rules, regulations, experiences become part of our life. So some part of us get adapted to that, and thereunder we become a compliant child or rebellious child. Sometimes what happens, all those rules and regulations and expectations which had come from parents or parent-like figures, you comply with all of that. So that part of our behavior is known as a compliant child, the complying behavior. But sometimes you may rebel against some of those experiences or rules and regulations or do's and don'ts that you were expected to do earlier, or rather you did when you were very small, because that time you hadn't developed your likes and dislikes, your way of life. So once we grow up, if we start rebelling against some of those do's and don'ts, some of those rules, so that is part of our rebellious behavior, which is known as a rebellious child, which we would see actually in small children. Small children, we ask them to do something, and if they don't like it, they immediately rebel. So let us just see that particular slide. The rebellious child. You see the child which is rebelling against you. The child who is not complying with your do's and don'ts. Can you see that kind of behavior in you? Can you see that kind of behavior in others who are around you? Do you observe such behavior? I am sure you observe such behavior very often. So this is part of our rebellious child behavior. Now the question is, what kind of behavior is the best behavior among the three? Should we be the natural child, or the rebellious child, or the complying child? I would say a combination of all the three. Suppose you have the natural child more in you, what happens? Your pleasure-seeking behavior, that may sometimes get you into trouble, maybe with law or maybe with others. So you have to decide what kind of pleasure-seeking behavior is okay, and to what extent. And what happens if you don't have this natural child in you? You might have observed people around you who are very rarely they are able to laugh, very rarely they are able to enjoy life. What happens to them? Stress is created, and they create stress to people around them also. So natural child must be part of our personality. And should we sometimes show rebellious behavior, or is it advisable? Sometimes yes, but if a very high proportion of rebellious behavior, what will that do to you? You might again land in trouble. You cannot be too rebellious all the time. So therefore, in the right proportion, rebellious behavior is also good. And complying child, should you comply? Should we comply? Yes, sometimes we have to comply. But should you be very submissive all the time? Someone would tell you what to do and you do accordingly. You have no opinion of yours. You have no decision of yours. That does not constitute a very healthy personality. So a right proportion of all 7 behaviors or 8 behaviors, what we discussed under behavioral model, that would constitute a healthy personality. It has to be in its right proportion. Too many of anything is going to make a skewed personality. That we would see in the coming sections as contamination of ego states and exclusion of ego states. Now let's see the next slide and try to understand the transaction. If you remember, we are actually discussing personality, the transactional analysis perspective. So therefore, we have to understand transaction. What is transaction? Transaction is something that takes place between two people. So now we are going to discuss the different kinds of transaction as discussed in transaction analysis theories. Complementary transaction. You see that we have 2 sets of ego states. One is the principal, the other one is the teacher. The principal says, your students have done a good job in putting together the annual day function. The teacher responds, yes, they deserve a lot of praise. Now, which is the origin of, from which ego state this originates? When the principal says your students have done a good job in putting together the annual day function, it originates from his parent ego state. How can we say that it originates from his parent ego state? Do you see, there is a kind of appreciation in the tone of the principal. So that comes from whom? The nurturing parent. So therefore, when the principal says, your students have done a good job in putting together the annual day function, it comes from his parent ego state. Now when the teacher replies, yes, they deserve a lot of praise, this is once again appreciation from the teacher. So that comes from the teacher's parent ego state. Therefore we call it a complementary transaction, meaning the transaction went to and received at the ego state where it was meant to receive. Therefore, it is a complementary transaction. The principal sent this message from his parent ego state and it was received at the parent ego state by the teacher. Therefore, this transaction is known as a complementary transaction. So this is one kind of a transaction under complementary transaction. There are different kinds of a complementary transaction which we would see in the next slides. So this is the second slide showing again complementary transaction 2. The principal. Is the report ready? The teacher. Yes, the report is ready. The principal might have given some work to the teacher to prepare a report. So now the principal is enquiring. What is that? The principal is seeking information. Therefore, it is the adult ego state of the principal that is in operation. And it was meant to be received at the adult ego state of the teacher. The teacher replies, yes, the report is ready. So, the teacher and the principal both had a complementary transaction, meaning the message was sent from the adult ego state of the principal and was received at the adult ego state of the teacher, because it was information seeking. That is how we can make out it is from the adult ego state. It was basically seeking information. In the earlier example, you would notice that it was from the parent ego state because it was appreciating a job done. Therefore, we say it originated from the parent ego state. Now we will see the next slide, that is complementary transaction 3. Teacher, would you like to go to the music concert? Principal, surely, let's go. Now, how do we recognize that this comes from child ego state? Because the teacher is asking a question to the principal. Would you like to go to the music concert? See, this is something about pleasure, something about enjoying life. So the child ego state of the teacher is excited about the music concert in the town. So therefore the teacher asks the principal, would you like to go to the music concert? When the principal replies, surely, let's go, meaning the principal is also in the same ego state as the teacher, the child ego state. So these are known as complementary transactions. We will see the next slide and see the fourth type of complementary transaction. Ria, you are a good teammate to work with. Hema, thanks for telling me. So the arrow shows that it originated from Ria's parent ego state, meant to be received at the child ego state of Hema. And it was received at the child ego state of Hema. How do we know? Because she is thanking Ria. Ria was appreciating her colleague's work. Therefore, it originated from her parent ego state and was meant to be received at the child ego state of Hema. And Hema received it there. How do we know that? Because she tells, thanks for telling me, meaning accepting the appreciation. Earlier transaction, do you remember complementary transaction, wherein the teacher and the principal both were in the parent ego state when they were appreciating, because both were appreciating the work of the students. Therefore, it was a complementary transaction operating from parent ego state. But this is a kind of a parent ego state, the slide which we saw just now, that sent from parent ego state to child ego state, received at the child ego state and sent back to the parent ego state. So these are the different complementary transaction. We will see the next slide. The fifth complementary transaction. John, shall I order the cinema tickets? Vicky, of course. Why is the arrow showing that it has originated from John's child ego state? because John is seeking permission. Therefore, it is meant to be received at the parent ego state of Vicky instead of the child ego state of Vicky. So, shall I order the cinema tickets? When Vicky says of course, he is responding from his parent ego state. This is also a complementary transaction. In all the complementary transaction, you might have noticed the arrows are parallel in nature, meaning the transaction is complementary to each other. We will now discuss the other kind of transaction. Then you will understand why I said in complementary transaction the arrow is in parallel. The transaction is complementary to each other. That is the cross transaction. Let's see that slide. Cross transaction. Cross transaction 1. A. Is the report ready? You remember earlier in the complementary transaction I showed you the principal asking is the report ready, then the teacher replying yes, the report ready. That was complementary transaction because both of them operated from the adult ego state, meaning they operated from the ego state which was meant to be sent to and received. In this case you see it is not going parallelly. A asking is the report ready? So A is operating from the adult ego state. How do you recognize that? Because A is seeking information. And where did B receive it? B didn't receive it at adult ego state. B hooked it at child ego state, the rebellious child ego state. So there B replies, do you think I have no other work to do? Therefore it is a cross transaction. Let's see the next one. So, cross transaction 2. Teacher, I want to discuss the resources I shall need to complete the assignment. Principal, you are always complaining. The teacher was operating from the adult ego state, but the principal operated from the critical parent ego state. Therefore, this transaction is crossed transaction. In the next slide, we will see duplex transaction. That means this transaction has two levels, psychological as well as social level. The social level is shown by the line, the other one is by the dotted line. See the conversation there. Will the report be ready? That is at a social level. At the psychological level, what does it mean? I feel so anxious. So B replies, yes, it will be. That is at the social level. And at the psychological level, B says, I feel confident. That is the message given. So this is known as a duplex transaction. There are two levels to the transaction. One is the social level, the other is the psychological level. We have so far discussed complementary transaction, cross transaction and duplex transaction. We will now wind up this session. So far what we discussed, from that I think you would make the conclusion that there are three different ego states as part of our personality, and any one particular ego state out of proportion may not show a healthy personality. That will be a skewed personality. So therefore our attempt should be to understand the different ego states and the behavior we indulge in. Therefore looking at our own behavior and trying to behave in an effective fashion using all the three ego state in its right proportion.